but a nice case study from a company we know very well, which will show you in real time how the Green Business Programme operates. As always, I'm hoping for a lot of interaction and hopefully some tricky questions. These sessions are all about stimulating discussion and interaction between all of you and ourselves at the council, so please do get involved. Before I start, a bit of housekeeping as always. First of all, if you turn your videos off, just helps with bandwidth, obviously. If you could also mute yourself to reduce the background noise, but obviously unmute to ask questions. Use the chat box as much as you can to ask questions. I'll also obviously put your hand up, and I'll also open up the floor after each speaker for questions. The webinar is recorded, as we always do, so you'll get to view that and share that afterwards. And there'll be a final Q&A session at the end, so please interact. So just remember, the expert panel we've assembled today is there to help. So please do reach out with any concerns, any queries, any questions, and we'll do what we can to help. So moving on, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our first guest speaker today, Eloise Cuff from Anthesis. Over to you, Eloise.
Thanks, John. Hi, everyone. So I'm Eloise Cuff. I'm a senior energy consultant at Anthesis. We're a global sustainability consultancy seeking to make a significant contribution to a world which is more resilient and productive. And we do this by working with cities, companies and other organisations to drive sustainable performance. Our teams span all aspects of sustainability, from resource use and waste, energy systems, cities and decarbonisation, supply chain, sustainable chemistry to agriculture and many more. I sit in the energy systems team, and we're made up of engineers, so both mechanical, building services and electrical, and consultants. As one of the consultants, I support clients with energy and carbon compliance, and also taking clients beyond compliance with their journey to become net zero. And then our engineers, amongst many projects, they also move these net zero projects forward with real life implementation. We've got several offices in the UK and globally, and I'm based out of our Bristol office. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. So today I'll be providing you with an overview of the challenges and opportunities regarding business energy use. The agenda is pretty packed, so I've just pulled out some hopefully interesting and key areas for each topic. So apologies if I perhaps don't cover something you were hoping to hear about, but I'll be looking at green energy tariffs, improving energy efficiency, owned buildings, leased buildings, engaging with landlords or building managers, on-site generation, and then a bit of information about some support that's available. Next slide, please. So it's important to recognise what the drivers are behind this topic. So I've pulled out a few key ones which are relevant, noting that there are obviously going to be other drivers that I won't cover and some that will be specific depending on your business sector. But talking about energy in the business is very relevant given the rising energy costs we're seeing at the moment, and realising efficiencies and keeping costs down is a really important step in managing those rising costs. Climate change is a key driver. Our planet is warming rapidly as carbon emissions soar, and we all need to be a part of the effort in tackling climate change. And to meet net zero targets, we need to decarbonise our buildings. So the 2020s will be key to delivering a step change in reducing emissions from buildings and establishing the foundations of a pathway to net zero. A key part of this will be moving away from burning fossil fuels for heating. Therefore, in the future, we're likely to see a greater mix of low carbon technologies such as solar PV and heat pumps. Next slide, please. And one more. Thank you. So what is a green tariff? Almost every electricity supplier has a green tariff aimed at their customers who want to buy renewable electricity. These tariffs are labelled as green if some or all of the units of electricity that the customer buys are matched by units of electricity that have been generated from a verified renewable energy source. So that could be a wind farm, it could be from a solar array or hydroelectric power station. Next slide, please. But how green are these green tariffs? So this actually varies significantly, which it might be a surprise or it might not, but for every megawatt hour of renewable electricity generated, a renewable energy guarantee of origin certificate, also known as a REGO, is assigned to this. But crucially, the certificate and the electricity don't have to be sold together. And this allows some electricity retailers to claim that they're selling renewable energy when really they're doing nothing of the kind. So critics will refer to this practice as greenwash, which I'm sure is a term that most of you will have heard at some point. But essentially, this is where the end customer believes that they're supporting renewable energy generation, but in reality, their supplier has merely bought up those unwanted REGO certificates and is using a market mechanism to undercut the genuinely green suppliers and hasn't invested in any new renewable capacity on the grid at all. The greenest tariffs come from those suppliers that buy the renewable electricity and its accompanying REGO certificates directly from renewable generators, such as UK wind or solar farms. And this is via a mechanism called a power purchase agreement. And this is something which never separates the REGO from the original units of generation. And examples of green tariffs that are actually green are available via GE UK, Good Energy and Ecotricity. So yeah, it's definitely worth doing your research before starting up a new green tariff. Next slide, please. So now on to improving energy efficiency. So what if you don't own your building? So the questions that you can see on this slide at the top are ones that we get asked a lot. So I've managed to find out some information from several colleagues, which hopefully you'll find quite helpful. I would start by saying, though, that it does come down to the contractual negotiation on lease renewal or acceptance. So that is your best time to sort of have this conversation with landlords or building managers. So general thoughts from colleagues of things to consider include the lease term. So longer terms might be more amenable for sustainability considerations. Cost share agreements, so building in cost sharing for sustainability improvements. Efficiency requirements, so that's where you might require a minimum level of energy efficiency for the building, and utilities transparency. So this might be where you require sub-metering and data sharing for accurate tracking of your energy use and emissions. This is something that's quite often problematic, is actually finding out the data and the information for what you're consuming in these leased buildings. And I've added some links to useful information. So the UK Green Building Council have a host of information on their website, so I would recommend having a look on there. The Clean Energy Buyers Association's commercial real estate principles can help guide conversations with your landlords and building managers. And finally, MEES, or the minimum energy efficiency standards, require landlords to let properties with a minimum of EPC band E before granting new tenancies. A few other things to consider around energy management and questions that you might want to ask your landlord include: does the property have energy efficient lighting and controls in place, or are you able to install them yourselves? Does the property have solar shading on south-facing windows or double glazing? Are there building fabric efficiency measures in place, such as effective draft proofing and insulation? Do tenants have control over timings of the heating and cooling systems? If not, then do you have local controls of the radiators? And some questions around renewable energy that you could ask include: does the landlord provide 100% renewable electricity supply contracts, so the green contracts I was mentioning, or will they allow you to make your own decision on who your provider is? Is there any on-site generation that's available for you to use, or is the property suitable for generation technologies such as solar panels? And yeah, does the building utilise ground source or air source heat pump technology? So yeah, just an example of some questions. Next slide, please. So I've pulled out the commercial real estate principles that I mentioned, just I think they could be quite useful for yourselves. And what they are non-binding directional statements intended to guide and encourage collaboration between tenants and landlords to increase sustainable energy solutions in commercial buildings. So both tenants and landlords can become signatories of the principles, and this would demonstrate your support for the initiative. Commercial real estate tenants might use the principles to clarify and streamline energy management requests to the landlords, resulting in a consistent demand signal that may simplify those questions for your landlords. And tenants may also include the principles in request for proposals and contract documents. Landlords might use these principles to inform sustainable energy solutions that are offered to their tenants. Next slide, please. So what can you do if you own your building or if you have full control of the building that you're in? So I've broken this into 3 steps, the first being about understanding your consumption. So data is really important and can help you understand your consumption and your energy profile, and it will inform what areas you need to focus on. So meter readings should be taken monthly if you're able to. And if you're in control of your utilities, you should supply meter readings to your supplier. Just this ensures that your bills will reflect your actual consumption instead of estimates of your consumption. And an easy way to see what is going on currently, if you just look at your bill, if there's an E, it means an E next to the line item of the consumption, it means it's an estimate. So you can quite quickly rectify that if you can get some meter readings. Half-hourly data might be available on request, and this can give an even more accurate picture of your profile. This might allow you to identify any trends or times in which consumption peaks, and it might also allow you to identify any issues. And then another really simple way to understand your consumption is just carrying out a simple walk around of the building, because then you'll see exactly what is consuming energy in the building, and it can help you to focus your attention where it's needed. Next slide, please. Some common areas in non-domestic buildings where efficiencies can often be realised are with lighting. So can you upgrade to more efficient LEDs, or can you add controls such as daylight or PIR sensors? Heating controls, are you able to adjust timings and temperatures on the boiler itself? If not, can you adjust the local control on radiators? Pipework, so quite a quick win to reduce heat loss is just simply insulating any exposed pipework running from the radiators to the boiler. Yeah, as I said, very quick and easy and quite cheap way to reduce heat loss. We've actually done this in our Bristol office. It doesn't look overly pretty, but yeah, it reduces heat loss, so therefore makes bills a little bit cheaper. Finally, next, point of use. So is your hot water just used for hand washing and washing up? If it is, then a point of use water heater might be better suited rather than using the mains. This is because it removes the heat loss from the pipework, and they typically have lower energy consumption. Aerated taps, so this is a low-cost attachment. Sometimes your local water utility provider might actually offer them for free, but it's a little attachment that you just put on your tap, and it reduces the water flow, which in turn reduces water usage and energy usage. Solar film on windows, so this can help for hot offices. It can reduce the demand for cooling in the warmer months. Server rooms, so they're typically cooled to too low a temperature. This is something that we see a lot when we go and do energy audits. So we often see that they're set to around 18 degrees. So this means that when the temperature in the room is above 18, cooling will kick in. But typically, the equipment is absolutely fine if you start cooling it at a higher temperature. So in the 20s, even around 26 degrees, it's generally okay. And this is a slightly obscure one, but something to get you thinking. If there are lots of people in the office, you can leave milk out of the fridge for around 8 hours a day without it being affected. So if there are lots of people just making cups of tea all the time or cups of coffee, constant opening and closing of the fridge means it will be working harder to keep cool and to maintain a constant temperature. And then just little things such as good housekeeping, so turning monitors off and turning lights off. I imagine everyone's quite good at doing that these days. Next slide, please. So the final step is having a robust plan in place. So a robust plan in a business, should be in place if you're addressing your energy consumption. And the intention should come from senior management, and then staff should be engaged in these matters. It's no good installing new heating controls if staff then go and use them incorrectly. There needs to be an action plan that is updated annually, and this could be framed around a management system such as ISO 50001 for energy management. And it's also quite common to have environmental champions in the workplace. So this would typically be an individual or a group of individuals that take responsibility on top of their day job to ensure that things are being carried out as per the action plan and to carry out walk-around surveys. Next slide, please. And one more. So I've sort of tailored this slide to technology that is probably most applicable in cities. So renewable energy generation is obviously very high on everyone's agenda, and on-site generation brings the benefit of being self-sufficient. So solar photovoltaics are a popular option, and despite recent increases in the cost of materials, they are generally becoming cheaper. JLL say that they're around 82% cheaper when compared to a decade ago. And payback for solar PV that we're seeing and often calculating is about 8 to 10 years, but this is going to reduce with the recent price increases. But yeah, you have to consider things such as long-term decisions, whether you'll be staying at the site and whether it is worth installing PV. There's other factors to consider, such as location. So are you overshadowed or are you south-facing to get the full benefit? What is your energy usage profile? So sizing of the installation does need to be able to cope with demand and peak demand. Will you use solar all day and then connect to the grid at night? You might wish to invest in storage to store any excess energy, or using a diverter, surplus energy can be diverted into heating your hot water. And then roof condition is another important factor when considering renewables. Is it strong enough and structurally sound? So the best thing to do would be to have a feasibility study carried out. Next slide, please. So what challenges do we see? So the photos that you see on this slide have been taken by the engineers in my team. So they've taken these on site visits, and they're challenges we often see when our clients are looking to switch to on-site generation. So heating emitters, they're often aged and difficult to access. The building fabric can be to a very low standard in old buildings. There might actually be a lack of cavity insulation. The structural strength of the roof for PV support, it might not have any at all. Existing plant can be a challenge, and quite often there's a requirement to upgrade the site's main electricity supply, and finally drawings aren't always available. Next slide, please, and one more. So yeah, just a couple of slides here about support that's available. As per the Spring Statement in March, to support the decarbonisation of non-domestic buildings, the government is introducing targeted business rate exemptions for eligible plant and machinery used in on-site renewable energy generation and storage, and 100% relief for eligible low-carbon heat networks with their own rates bill. So the Spring Statement announced that these measures would take effect from April 2022, and this, just to note, was a year earlier than had previously been planned. And next slide, please. So the Energy Technology List, or ETL, I've popped a link to it on the slide. This is a list created and updated monthly by the government's Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, or you may have heard of them as BEIS, which provides details of energy saving products for businesses and the public sector. Since its inception, this scheme has assessed nearly 60,000 products and now features around 56 technology categories. So just some categories that are included are boiler equipment, heat pumps, heating, ventilation and air conditioning equipment, high-speed hand dryers, lighting, pipework insulation, refrigeration equipment, and solar thermal systems and collectors, and yeah, many more. And next slide, please. Yep, so thank you very much for listening, and do let me know if you have any questions.
Lovely, thank you, Eloise. That was really informative. I think as well, just to mention, it mirrors some of the advice we give in the Green Business Programme as well. So it's good to see that we're doing things right. And if you don't mind, I'm going to pinch your milk and fridge analogy to put into some of my reports as well, because I quite like that. Just to confirm to everybody on the call that we are going to share the slides afterwards, because there's a lot of nice information on those slides, including some nice links to point you towards some more information. So thank you again. That was really informative. Do we have any questions at all? Anybody want to raise their hand? There's nothing in the chat at the moment. So any businesses got any queries at all? I mean, it is important to stress that the latter slides that Eloise went through, that's the kind of stuff that we can help you out with as well. So if you can't get the information you want off Eloise's slides, get in touch with us at the Green Business Programme, and we can do those sort of reports and those energy guidance bits and bobs for you. Okay, well, if there's no questions, don't forget we are going to have a larger Q&A at the end. So maybe if you think of something in the meantime, then please drop it in the chat and we'll address it later. But I think we'll move on to our next speaker. So I'd like to welcome David Robson to the webinar. As you can see, David is the CEO of Instagroup. Over to you. Thanks, David.
Thanks very much. Hello everyone, and thanks for having me on today. My name is Dave Robson and I'm the CEO of Instagroup, and I'm going to be talking to you today about the importance of insulation and energy efficiency. Insulation is vital if the UK is going to achieve its net zero targets by 2050, but for individuals and businesses it can play a really important and immediate part in reducing the impact of energy bills that are increasing at an alarming rate. But before I go through that, I just want to give you a brief introduction to Instagroup and some of the successes we've had in delivering large-scale retrofit programs, and highlight some of the learnings and key factors that we need to embody in order to get sustainability into our buildings. So Instagroup is based near Reading in Berkshire. We're about to complete our 41st year of trading, and during this time we've developed a range of energy efficiency solutions and systems, primarily focused on the domestic market, but also looking at some commercial buildings as well. We work on some really large construction projects, putting in acoustic insulation systems that reduce sound impact and that combine with underfloor heating to improve energy efficiency of buildings there. And we also worked on some pretty prestigious projects, my most recent one being Battersea Power Station in London. Our coverage extends all over the country. We're not just a southeast based business, and we've undertaken some projects in cities all over the country, but we also have a network of SMEs who operate our systems all over the country. Can we have next slide, sorry? We offer a whole range of thermal insulation services, from cavity wall insulation, loft insulation to solid wall insulation. So any building type that you have, we will have systems that are suitable for it. Our whole approach has been developing systems that are originally tested by bodies such as the BBA, but are also underpinned by guarantees and a quality framework. And that for us is really important. For those of you who kind of think insulation is something that can be installed by any kind of builder or tradesman, that's where a lot of the mistakes around insulation come out. Next slide, please. So we've got a network of SMEs that was formed over 20 years ago. There's about 60 members in our network. And this network was developed when the government funding schemes came into the board. The most kind of recent one is called the Energy Company Obligation that you may have heard of. Essentially what that's designed to do is domestically focused, but it's designed to target those who are more vulnerable and help them improve the insulation of their home or energy efficiency of their home through various insulation and heating kind of interventions. We're very well recognised within the industry, and we basically, our whole business is built on quality and trust, and it's something that has really stood us in good stead, and it's something that's becoming increasingly relevant as there is more focus on energy efficiency and what you can do to reduce the kind of ever increasing energy costs. We also have a dedicated technical team who go around and check all of the work that's done by our SME network, and that's something that is industry leading. Next slide, please. So essentially what we try and do is put the climate strategy and legislation into practice by delivering retrofit projects that reduce carbon emissions and help thousands of residents and SME business owners to reduce their fuel bills. We work with social housing providers, housing associations, local authorities, and we try and match up various funding streams that are there, including social housing decarbonisation fund and a local authority delivery fund. And although these are primarily aimed at domestic buildings, there is a lot of funding out there for commercial buildings. I just want to spend the next few minutes talking about the theme of Fabric First. The Fabric First is something that is very common in our industry, and it's there for a reason. Essentially, if you start with the building's external envelope, what it does is it enables you to actually fix all of the leaking that happens in a building, and then you can start to move on to other things. But if you get the fabric of a building efficient and you cut out waste, then you actually can you can look, when you're looking at heating, you can look at alternative heating sources. But also, even if you're not looking at an alternative heating source, you can reduce the size of the heating system that you're putting in, which essentially saves you time and money. When you look at doing any fabric first thing, it's really important that you assess the condition of the property first, and make sure that any building defects are identified and addressed. Because if you don't, and you start to put either things on the outside of the building, or you start to fill cavity walls, you can actually end up doing more damage to the building, which is why it's really, really important that you get an expert to look at it. You also need to make sure that you look at the building ventilation, because the thing around insulation is you are sealing up a building, and which is fine if you've got essential ventilation maintained, but with a building, you do need to make sure that you're blocking up areas, but you're also leaving enough ventilation, because houses are living buildings. They are meant to breathe, and you need to make sure that you don't end up effectively sealing a building, making it so airtight that you end up getting damp and condensation problems. You also need to make sure that when you're combining the different elements of insulation, so you're looking at the walls, the roofs, windows and doors, that actually the interfaces between the different insulation elements are considered, because essentially if you don't, you end up getting cold spots which channel where heat essentially kind of ends up being kind of forced through to those cold spots, and that creates problems as well. So Eloise touched on it around gaps and you know, ceiling pipework. You need to make sure that you take a holistic view of the building and you address every issue. In terms of fabric first, as I briefly mentioned earlier, it's also really important that you look at the fabric before you start to think about renewables, particularly when you're looking at things such as heat pumps, because heat pumps, essentially, the efficiency of a building is really, really important to sizing that heat pump, but also making sure it works efficiently. The other thing about sorting the fabric out first is it stops you overheating a building. It's a really, really common thing in the heating industry to have people with a boiler that is far too big for the property that it's heating, and that's a really, really inefficient way. So by getting the fabric sorted and then by correctly sizing the heating system that you need for the building you're in, it's a really important part of any fabric and energy efficiency improvements. Can I have the next slide, please? As we all know, energy bills are increasing at an alarming rate, and you know, that's bad enough for us as domestic kind of in our homes, but actually SMEs, it's really, really important that we look at the buildings we're in for a number of reasons. Firstly, if your building isn't properly insulated, bearing in mind most SMEs will be in their building all day during the winter and therefore heating that building all day. If you are wasting it, you are literally just burning money. But secondly, with energy bills going up at the rate they are, obviously the domestic market, and there's been quite a lot of talk about this, is protected a little bit from those energy bill rises because of the price caps. Now that obviously doesn't apply in the non-domestic sector. So every time gas and electricity prices go up, businesses are going to be immediately impacted. So it just really is a financial no-brainer to kind of make sure that our buildings are as efficient as possible, and we're not just burning money and heating our buildings for it to go straight through the walls and out the windows. The other good thing about kind of insulation is that it's ideal for, you know, people who live busy lives or people who are inherently lazy, because once you've done it, you don't need to do anything else. It's not something where you need to change the way you live in that building or that you operate that building. Essentially, once it's done, you can forget about it. And that's one of the really, really kind of main benefits of insulation that people forget, is that once you've done it, the building kind of just adapts naturally, and you just, you know, you don't have to change your heating settings or anything like that. The building will just adapt to it. I would be really, really keen to hear about any specific plans that you have for your buildings, or any help that you can that we can give you in making your buildings more energy efficient. Insulation is really, really simple, but it needs to be done properly. It needs to be done by people who know what they're doing, who understand where the potential pitfalls are, and understand what the risks associated with your building are. You know, insulation, you know, most insulation that's put in is non-combustible, but people quite rightly are concerned about what is going on from the fire rating within their building, and you know, getting the work done by qualified people who understand what they're doing is really, really important. That's it from me. I'd be happy to answer any questions either now or offline afterwards. My email address is at the bottom there. It's david.robson@instagroup.co.uk. Thank you.
Lovely, David. Thanks for sharing that with us. And just to confirm again, we are sharing the slides. So if those slides are of interest, we'll send them out to you after the presentation. I think just to sort of align the Green Business Programme with what David's spoken about, we do fund insulation within our programme. We do use very similar calculations to what David showed on one of those slides as well. So get in touch if it is of interest. David, just got a question for yourself really before I go into the chat. Do you guys work out any sort of payback periods for within your sort of quotations? Do you work out payback periods for an investment? Because that's what we do within our reports. I wonder whether you do the same.
Yeah,
we find that we call it the lowest hanging fruit. Pretty much insulation and LED lighting are the two things that we sort of promote as the quickest turnaround on the investment, if that follows.
Yeah, we do, and actually, I think the problem with paybacks in terms of the calculations is they have to be inherently kind of pessimistic.
Yeah.
But actually, if you look at where energy bills have gone, you know, the payback is becoming quicker every time.
Yes.
I think energy bills go up, and you know, insulation is inherently pretty cheap. You know, depending on the building type, your biggest costs actually are access costs. So, you know, doing the work is actually pretty cheap. It's you know, if you need to have scaffolding up, that probably adds a significant cost. So it just depends what you're having done. But yes, it's the payback is something that we would always kind of promote.
Yeah, perfect. The phrase is the cheapest energy is energy you don't use, isn't it, basically? So yeah, and I think maybe you did mention this on your presentation, but I was looking in the chat at the time. I think it's important to state that if you are looking in the future to have a heat pump on your premises, in order to make that work as effectively as possible, you'd need to have the building highly insulated, or it won't work. So it's really good idea. Again, we can help fund it, so do get in touch and we can give you some payback calculations on that. Just looking in the chat, we have, just to go back to is Scott or Scott, I'm sorry if I've got your name wrong. I do think I know where you're located, just to let you know. And I do think you do the best Guinness in the Midlands, if that's a bit of good feedback for you. But I hope that I've given you a bit of information about solar. We do have a list of suppliers that we work with. We're not allowed to give particular companies as a direct referral, but we do have a link I can send you with some solar suppliers on there, and we can share that with you after the chat, if that's okay. And then just coming to Marcus has asked a good question, or sorry, Taylor rather. Yes, as we've alluded to just now, we do have grants available. Now there are eligibility criteria to jump through in terms of whether we can help you or not, but at the very least we can give you some good guidance on what we need to do, and we can look at the roof and look at your structure as well. So get in touch. We'll share a registration form after the presentation. If you're eligible, then we can give you some guidance and look to give you some grants as well. So very good. Any other questions? Anyone want to put their hands up? Anyone want to jump in at all to ask any questions for David? If not, we can move on to the next speaker. Okay, well, again, just to confirm, we are having a bigger Q&A at the end. So if anyone thinks of anything, then drop it in the chat and we'll jump back to those questions. So I'd like to move on to our third speaker, my colleague, Matthew Dillow, who works with me in the Green Business Programme. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you, John. Yeah, so I'm Matt Dillow. I'm a business development manager at the council, and I'm just going to run through sort of 6 or 7 slides, which explains a little bit more about what the Green Business Programme is about and how it can potentially support you. Next slide, please. So just to lay it in context, which builds kind of what Eloise and David said. I know there's concerns at the moment in the SME community over kind of COVID and the recovery from there, changes with Brexit, and then obviously over the past couple of months with rising energy costs. So this quote on the left-hand side was quite eye-opening, that 70% of SME business owners believe that their cost of their energy bill impacts the growth of their business. So this is kind of where the Green Business Programme comes in, try and provide information, advice, and grant funding to help kind of overcome some of those barriers. So if I move on. So this is what some of the benefits our programme can do if you've not already been involved. So obviously, as we just mentioned, reduced energy bills, reduced maintenance cost, obviously reduced carbon emissions, which is becoming more and more important at the moment. potentially reduce waste disposal costs, and then looking at also improvements to working conditions, whether that's an improvement to the lighting quality or an improvement to the thermal comfort, and obviously increased competitiveness, profitability, and kind of safeguarding the business kind of moving into the future. So what we offer kind of three main strands. The first is the network. So obviously webinars, events, a monthly newsletter with different kinds of advice, information on there, which as you're kind of part of this webinar already means you've engaged with that. We then offer grant funding, so funding between 1k and 50k to fund up to 40% costs of installing energy efficiency measures. So there, like John, Eloise, David have said, those cover a lot of what we've already talked about in this session, but just provide some more kind of ideas. On the right there's kind of lighting, heating, ventilation, renewable technology, compressors, really anything which we can attribute a carbon saving to could be eligible, and we'll work with you on kind of working out the eligibility and what best suits you. So, and the third strand we offer is energy and resource efficiency advice, reports. So where you may not know what measures are best for your business, and like John said, kind of low-hanging fruit, the ones you potentially want to look at first, one of our business advisors can go out and do a free of charge energy and resource efficiency audit, which does identify, kind of looks at all of your energy bills, looks at where you're spending the energy. Can you move on, please, Maria? And yeah, essentially, it'll identify what best to do. As the programme is funded by European Regional Development Fund, there's obviously eligibility criteria that we have to meet. So first and foremost, it needs to be located within Coventry and Warwickshire. It then needs to reach the SME criteria, so employ fewer than 250 people, have an annual turnover of less than 50 million, and not operate as a franchise business model. And then there's a couple of other criteria there, so trading for a minimum of 12 months, just so we can kind of quantify those carbon savings. We usually support businesses which are business to business, and then there's just one more, that you've not received more than 200,000 euros of de minimis aid over the past 3-year period. Can I move next slide? So yeah, moving on to exactly what the audit covers. So as I mentioned before, one of the advisors will come out, meet you on site. We'll kind of discuss operating hours, age of the building, kind of what insulation is already in place, and then we'll look to analyse your energy bills. From there, we'll identify energy efficiency improvements which can be made. So through the kind of list that we had earlier, so it could be heating, lighting, insulation, but it will be bespoke to your business. So the kind of measures which best suit you. We will then be able to explain how the programme works, how to make applications, and then obviously go into claim the grant funding at the end. So once we've done all this energy audit, we'll present it to you as a report, and it will include kind of everything I've discussed there. So payback period, kind of estimated costs, etc. Can I move on? So just touching briefly on the application process, I guess I won't go through it kind of step by step, but I guess the main thing is where you have a desire to become more sustainable, we want to hear from you. We will work with you throughout the whole process. So we're not just going to leave you to it. We're going to work on the energy report with you. We'll work on submitting the application together, and yeah, hopefully that will help you to realise some of the benefits we identified in the kind of first and second slides. So these are just some of the achievements. So since the programme started in 2016, we've been able to support over 288 businesses, paid almost 3 million in grant funding, looking at a carbon saving of almost 14,000 tonnes per year, and we now have almost 2,000 members in the network. So I think this is growing kind of day by day with concerns over energy prices and businesses knowing the need to go more greener, more sustainable. We are seeing kind of more and more interest in the programme and in climate change and sustainability more generally. Can I move? And just one last thing. So that covers kind of all of green business. And then I just wanted to highlight another team we have in the climate change team at the council, which are Business Sustain. So they're a team of environmental consultants at the council who provide bespoke environmental management advice. They provide registered environmental and health legislation, compliance audits, and can help to support accreditations such as ISO 14001 environmental management system, and the other ISO there. So they kind of go kind of the next level of environmental management. So if any of that interests you, then please do get in touch with them or via us, and we can kind of make the contact for you. And I think that's me done. So does anybody have any questions at all?
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Is there any questions at all for Matt? I think it's sort of, you can see how it's all sort of starting to piece together for those on the call now. Obviously, we're there to help with the professional guidance, basically. So so do get in touch. As I said before, we will send out all this literature, all the slides alongside an SME registration form. So if you are interested, fill out that registration form, and then one of the advisors, myself or Matt, will get in touch and discuss things with you further. We are busy, just to point out, but we will help and we will get to you and we'll give you guidance. So don't worry if we can't get out to site for a couple of weeks. We're there to help, basically. So just jumping into the chat, Marcus, you've asked a good question. Business to business. Now, there are, just to explain about the eligibility criteria, we are guided, unfortunately, by the European ERDF funding rules. It's quite strict on various areas. Technically, business to business means that you're selling to another business rather than to a consumer, which would be B2C. Now, sports clubs, unfortunately, don't fall within the criteria that we can help with, but I'm happy to talk to you after this presentation, if that's okay. Just to double check that eligibility, as I say, we do want to help and see where I can give you some guidance. So if you don't mind, I'll drop you an email after the webinar and we can have a chat at a time to suit you. We can go for that in more detail. Are there any more questions for Matt in terms of the Green Business Programme? Okay. So moving on to our last but not least, James, our final speaker. I'd like to introduce James Callow to the webinar. James works for Middlemarch Environmental, a company that we know very well within the council, and he's going to go through what his business does in a bit more detail, but also give you a case study from where we've helped him, which again sort of ties everything together from what you've heard so far this morning. So over to you, James. Good luck.
Thank you very much. Cheers, Jonathan. Yes, my name's James Callow. I am a senior consultant within a company called Middlemarch Environmental Limited. For those of you that don't know, Middlemarch is the consultancy arm of Warwickshire Wildlife Trust. So we're a wholly owned subsidiary of the Wildlife Trust, and we mainly do consultancy on biodiversity related issues. So badgers, bats, great crested newts, reptiles, and also habitat surveys and things like that. I work as their senior consultant. My background is I did a degree at Coventry University and a master's degree in ecology. The master's degree, though, focused more on environmental monitoring and assessment, so more about waste and energy and water and some of the wider environmental disciplines. So I kind of mix what I do with ecology with also managing the ISO 14001 environmental management system that Middlemarch has as a company. Could I just move on to the next slide, please, Marie? Thank you. And yeah, if you could just load all the bullet points up, that would be great. Thank you. So, as I mentioned before, we're wholly owned by Warwickshire Wildlife Trust, which is a conservation charity. A significant proportion of our turnover, so 10% of our turnover, not our profit, is given to the trust as a gift aid contribution every year. So we made £6 million last financial year. So we would have given the trust £600,000, which they can spend on nature conservation projects within the Coventry and Warwickshire area. We have at the moment 90 members of staff, plus some seasonal staff and some students. We have some students from Coventry University placed with us, and a lot of our members of staff have been through programs at Coventry University, degrees and masters programs. As said before, we mainly concentrate on protected species surveys and habitat mitigation. That can be right through from someone like a private individual that wants to convert their loft and needs a bat survey, to major infrastructure projects like we work on road projects like the A14 bypass scheme. We work on things like Hinkley Point, the new nuclear power station there, doing a lot of ecology for that site. So wide range of different clients. And as I say, we have had for a number of years our own environmental management system. In terms of the work that was mentioned previously by Jonathan in Business Sustain, we use that process to manage our legal register and look at what we need to do from a legal compliance point of view. And that's been very helpful for us. But we've also looked at, as part of the ISO 14001 process, at our environmental performance. And one of the significant aspects that we identified as a business was the amount of energy that we use. We're also a team of consultants, so our consultants obviously go out and drive to a lot of our project sites and meet clients and things like that. So vehicle usage is a significant issue for us, and that obviously had an impact in terms of our carbon footprint. And what we found as well as a business, that for a lot of these bigger projects that we're tendering for as part of the pre-qualification questionnaire process, we were asked a lot of questions about, well, it's great that you're a wildlife trust and you're obviously doing some very good things for wildlife, but what are you actually doing about your own environmental performance? What's significant for you? Are you doing anything about carbon? Are you measuring your carbon footprint? And in order to get through the pre-qualification questionnaire and get on the supplier list for a lot of these contracts, we needed to look at that a lot more closely. So could I just move on to the next slide, please, Maria? Thank you. So as a business, we have our 3-year development plan. So what we did last year is to try and establish as a business our carbon footprint baseline. From there, we'd look at developing a carbon reduction action plan and reporting process. And ambitiously, our executive director that sits on the integrated management steering group for us said that we want a target of 60% reduction in operational carbon and a net zero roadmap by 2023. So, as I say, carbon reduction became a massive consideration for us as part of the company's strategic direction. And one of the things that we needed to do, because obviously we're specialists in ecology, we're not really specialists in wider environmental issues. And as I say, I went to university about 25 years ago. So my knowledge of current status in terms of energy and carbon footprinting is extremely limited. So if I could just move on to the next slide, please, Marie. Thank you. We undertook a process of with several of the wildlife trusts are measuring our carbon footprint using a team of specialist advisors. And what we found out that, yes, we were correct in terms of our diesel fleet consumption was a significant source of carbon for us. Also our staff commute as well was a significant source of that. But the main factor in our carbon footprint after the vehicles was our use of electricity. So heat, light and power are things that we also needed to focus on as well in order to make significant reductions and hit that 60% target that we were aiming for. So can I just move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. It was really timely in a way that obviously through our relationship with Coventry City Council, as I say, we know the university well, we know the City Council well because we use Business Sustain and things like that. We actually identified the opportunity that they would come in and do a free energy assessment for us in terms of looking at the performance of the building and what we could do to reduce our carbon footprint. So it was perfect timing from that point of view. And the way that they set it out is that this was even during the times of COVID lockdown, is that all we would need to do is kind of just gather evidence from the building, answer a few short sets of questions in terms of, you know, what we were doing in terms of electricity and heating and lighting and things like that, send some data. And then the bulk of the work in terms of actually identifying where we could make some savings was performed by the auditors. So out of the end of the process, what we got was a very detailed report of several different energy saving measures that we could look at. It detailed the upfront cost of the investment that we'd need to make, how many tons of CO2 it would save, and also what the annual savings were. So we could work out approximately, you know, at what point we'd break even, and then, you know, it would actually start to save us money in the longer term as well. So I went through this process with Bernie at the City Council. She's one of the consultants there. She was extremely helpful. We sent her lots and lots of data, lots of pictures, and she put together a table of all of these different measures, about 10 or 11 in total, which we thought were particularly good for us, were that the lighting within the building was on a very old system, so all strip lights or halogen LEDs and things like that, and she'd identified that as quite a big upfront cost, but it would save a lot of carbon and it would actually save a massive amount of electricity if we change those over as well. We also, despite the building having air conditioning, it had a number of old electrical heaters installed. So again, by just using the air conditioning rather than putting these electric heaters on, we could just get rid of those and save ourselves a massive amount of carbon, and save ourselves a lot of money for zero cost, just the cost of taking the heaters off the wall and dismantling them, basically. Also, if we did want to still use convection heating for heating things like the stairwell in the main office and the reception area, the larger spaces, we could swap out the older, less efficient convection heaters and put in some Dimplex 400-watt heaters. And again, that would save us carbon. And, you know, for an initial outlay of £850, it would actually save us £2,160, as you can see there, in terms of the reduction of electricity. So the information provided by the audit is very simple, very straightforward. And it immediately gave us some ideas of things that we could do, that we could discuss with the directors, and it gave us all of the information that we needed to make a business case to say, yes, you know, we need to make this investment to change the lighting up front, but actually you can see in the longer term that this is going to save us a significant amount of both carbon and of money in the longer term as well. So it's all good things that the directors like to hear. Sorry, could I just move on to the next slide, please? So as you can see, there's some photographs here of some of the changes that we've made following the 40% of grant funding. So again, although you have that capital expenditure, almost half of that is funded by the grant as well, which made a massive difference to us as a company in terms of what we could do, changing our lighting and heating. So as you can see, we've swapped out all of the old traditional strip lights within the ceiling and replaced them all with LED lighting, which is much better and much brighter, as well as being significantly more energy efficient as well. Ditto with the old halogen spotlights, they've all changed to LED lights now as well. And we've swapped out our old convecting heatings for these new energy efficient heaters that you can see there, the 400 watt Dimplex heaters, which again is going to save us a significant amount of energy in the longer term, heating those big spaces in the foyer and the stairwell. So last slide, please. Right. Thank you. So just kind of some takeaway messages from our experience of going through that process of the energy audit and the report and the grant funding process. The great thing for us is that it allowed, you know, an independent specialist to conduct a wide-ranging, comprehensive review of what we're doing energy-wise within the building and the carbon impact of that. And that was great for us in terms of, you know, our objectives and targets as a business. It was great in terms of, you know, 14,001 and being externally audited, because we could show the work that the City Council had done to our external auditors, and they were, you know, very pleased with that and very supportive of that, which is great for us as well. So as I say, we did most of this during COVID, so all of the information was just, as I say, a set of photographs, sending some bills, some information about, you know, our electricity consumption, the vehicle fleet and usage, what kind of vehicles we had, how many, those sorts of things as well. The City Council do all of the technical stuff, so they will take all of that information away, they will crunch all of that data, and they will put it in a very user-friendly report at the end of the day, which outlines a lot of options that you can get to make some significant savings. It will put a cost against that, it will put a carbon saving against that. It gives you a lot of really good information, you know, that you can discuss with your senior management team to make some decisions about things that you can do. And the great thing is, as well, as I say, 40% of that cost is actually provided through the grant if you do want to make some of those changes as well. So from our point of view, it's comprehensively changed the lighting and heating within the building. All of our old lighting was swapped out with new LED lighting, and all of the, as I say, the communal areas were swapped out from convecting heating to new energy efficient heating, which saved a significant amount of CO2 and energy. And in the longer term, it's all put in the report, you know, we will break even with that and then move into a cost saving every year on that as well. So it will pay for itself, and then we'll be into profit at the end of that. So the great thing from our point of view as well, being supported by the Green Business Initiative, is that obviously any savings that we make as a company, because of our relationship with Warwickshire Wildlife Trust, you know, we can pass more money back to them, which they can spend on local conservation projects as well. So they can reinvest money that we would have spent swapping out the lights and changing the heaters and things like that into conservation projects locally in Coventry and Warwickshire. So yeah, it's been a great programme from that point of view, and it's been a help both to us and to our parent organisation, the Warwickshire Wildlife Trust, as well. So that's just a quick run through of what we've done. The next slide is just if anyone's got any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Perfect. Thank you, James. That was really good, and I think that tied the webinar together very nicely. And it's good to see your positive feedback. I promise everyone that we've not paid James to give us that feedback. That's genuine. That's genuine feedback, and it shows you what we're looking to do. That follows the advice of all the guest speakers today, and it shows you how we can help you reduce your costs and then reinvest that money back into the business, or as you see fit. So that was a really good case study. Thank you very much, James. Has anyone got any final questions they've perhaps been saving, or anything they've just thought of? Please put up your hand, put it in the chat. Or maybe we've just been that concise, it's covered all of your questions. I think one thing just to mention quickly in terms of the Green Business Programme, we are European funded, so of course that will come to an end soon, and we all know why. We need to have your application and your projects completed by March 2023 in order to qualify for the funding. So things that are quick to do, like LED and so on, is quite straightforward. But if you're thinking of using us to fund some solar, longer term projects, that kind of thing, please get in touch soon, because you'll need to have your quote in, your solar on your roof, all of it done before you can claim the money. So engage with us as quickly as you can. We'll give you guidance. We'll get out to site. I mean, as James has said, his audit was done remotely during COVID. We're now visiting site, obviously. So get in touch, and we can help, and we can get things done before the end of the grant funding. Just for the people that have been popping into the chat, as I've said, I will come back to you after the webinar if that's possible. We've got your contact details on record, so I'll give you a call and we'll pick that up. If there's no further questions, I think I'll draw things to a close. So first of all, to everyone on the webinar, thanks for attending. I hope it's been useful. I'd like to thank all of our guest speakers as well. They've all given up their time this morning to contribute, so thank you. You'll receive the slides, you'll receive a video that'll be on our website. You'll also get a survey from us, just with some general feedback questions that helps us improve our presentation. We do also have a date for our next event, which will actually be in person. We're looking at the 20th of July. So put that in your diaries. Further instructions will be sent out via our channels and so on. So keep that date in mind. Let's have a quick. Oh, we had a quick question come in, which I'll jump to quickly. Yes, Natalia, your question. Yeah, we can help with that. There'll be an SME registration form sent out following this webinar. I can pick that up. You work in my patch, so I can pick that up. I can give you some guidance. So fill out the form, and then we'll be in touch to sort of show where we can help. We'll check your eligibility first of all, show where we can help, and if need be, we can get an audit booked in for you as well, so we can get that moving forward. So good question. So finally, thank you again all for attending. Best of luck with your net zero journeys, and keep an eye out for the 20th of July for the in-person event. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.